She looked at him, and felt nothing but disappointment. A poor farmer, standing quietly in worn clothes, chosen by her family as her future husband. No charm, no ambition, at least, that's what she believed. So deep inside, she refused him, even as the wedding preparations continued around her. To her, this marriage was a mistake. A life she didn't want, a future she didn't deserve. But on the day of the wedding, something felt different. Just as the ceremony was about to begin, the sound of luxury cars echoed through the village. People stopped, the music faded. And then, in front of everyone, well-dressed officials stepped out and walked straight toward the man she had been ashamed of. What happened next, no one expected. Respect replaced silence, power replaced simplicity. And the poor farmer, she had rejected, was suddenly revealed to be someone far beyond anything she had imagined. In that moment, her pride shattered, her certainty collapsed, and the man she once refused, became the one who held her entire future in his hands. In the quiet farming village of Kijani, life moved with the rhythm of the seasons. The soil was rich, the air was warm, and the people believed deeply in tradition. In this village, marriages were not always about love, they were about family honor, survival, and sometimes, obligation. And that was exactly the kind of marriage Zuri Ndlovu found herself trapped in. Zuri was known throughout Kijani for her beauty, her sharp mind, and her dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of the village. While others were content with farming life, Zuri wanted more. She imagined a future in the city, fine clothes, success, and a life where she would never have to struggle under the hot sun or depend on unpredictable harvests. But her father, Mandla Ndlovu, saw things differently. "Our land is our life," he would often say, "and your future must protect it." So when Mandla announced that Zuri would marry a local farmer named Kabelo Makona, it wasn't a discussion. It was a decision. Zuri's heart dropped the moment she heard his name. Kabelo was known in the village, but not in the way she would have wanted. He lived on the outskirts, worked quietly in his fields, and kept to himself. His clothes were always simple, often worn. He didn't attend social gatherings, didn't try to impress anyone, and never spoke more than necessary. To Zuri, he represented everything she was trying to escape. "I won't marry him," she said firmly that evening, her voice shaking with anger. Her father didn't even look surprised. "You will," Mandla replied calmly. "This marriage secures our land and our future." Zuri's mother tried to soften the tension, but the decision had already been made. In Kijani, a father's word carried weight, and Zuri knew she was fighting a battle she was unlikely to win. Still, she didn't give up easily. The next day, she went to see Kabelo herself. If there was any chance to stop this, it had to come from him. She found him in his field, working under the sun, his hands covered in soil. He looked up as she approached, his expression calm, almost as if he had been expecting her. "So it's true," Zuri said, crossing her arms. "They want us to get married." Kabelo nodded once. Yes, that was it. No excitement, no nervousness, just acceptance. Zuri felt irritation rise inside her. "You're okay with this?" she asked sharply. "Marrying someone who clearly doesn't want you?" Kabelo studied her for a moment before replying. "It's not about wanting," he said quietly. "It's about what is meant to be." His calmness only made her more frustrated. "I'm not part of some meant-to-be story," she snapped. "I have plans. I have a future, and it doesn't include this village or this life." Kabelo didn't react the way she expected. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, didn't try to convince her. Instead, he simply said, "Then you should follow what you believe is right." Zuri blinked, caught off guard. "That's it?" she asked. "You're not even going to fight for this marriage?" A faint, almost unreadable smile crossed his face. "Some things don't need to be forced," he replied. There was something about the way he said it, something steady, almost confident, but Zuri ignored it. To her, it sounded like weakness. She turned away, her frustration growing stronger. "This marriage is a mistake," she said firmly. "And I won't pretend otherwise." Kabelo didn't stop her as she walked away. He simply returned to his work, as if her words hadn't shaken him at all. And somehow, that bothered her more than anything else. Days passed, and the wedding preparations began. The entire village buzzed with excitement. Women gathered to prepare food, men arranged seating and decorations, and children ran around carrying messages and supplies. To them, it was a celebration. But to Zuri, it felt like a prison closing in. She wore the dresses her mother prepared, attended the meetings, and smiled when expected, but inside, she felt trapped. Every step toward the wedding felt like a step away from the life she wanted. Her friends noticed. "You're really going to marry him?" one asked quietly. "I don't have a choice," Zuri replied. "But he's just a farmer," another whispered. Zuri's expression hardened. "I know." The words carried more weight than she intended. Meanwhile, Cabello continued his life as if nothing unusual was happening. He worked in his fields, spoke little, and avoided unnecessary attention. Some villagers admired his quiet nature, but most saw him the same way Zuri did, a simple man with nothing extraordinary about him. What they didn't know was that Cabello wasn't worried, not about the wedding, not about Zuri's rejection, not about the whispers, because he knew something no one else did. And on the day of the wedding, that truth would change everything. The morning of the wedding arrived with a golden sunrise that painted the village of Kijani in warm light. Drums echoed faintly in the distance, women sang traditional songs, and the air carried the scent of freshly cooked food. For everyone else, it was a day of celebration. But for Zuri Ndlovu, it felt like the beginning of a life she never chose. She sat quietly inside her family's home, dressed in a beautifully prepared bridal outfit, her hands resting still in her lap. Around her, women moved with excitement, adjusting her attire, praising her beauty, laughing softly as they spoke about marriage and the future. "You look stunning," one of them said. Zuri forced a faint smile. Inside, her thoughts were far from peaceful. Every sound outside, the music, the laughter, the footsteps, only reminded her that there was no turning back. This was happening, whether she wanted it or not. Her mother knelt beside her, gently adjusting a piece of fabric near her shoulder. "Sometimes," she said softly, "life gives us paths we don't understand at first." Zuri didn't respond, because she didn't believe that. To her, this wasn't fate. It was a mistake. Outside, the village gathered in full energy. Men arranged seating under large shaded areas, children ran around excitedly, and elders took their places with quiet authority. The entire community had come together, not just for a wedding, but for what they believed was a union that strengthened the village itself. Cabello Makona stood at a distance, near the ceremonial area. He wore simple but clean traditional clothing. Nothing extravagant, nothing designed to impress. Yet there was something different about him that day, not in appearance, but in presence. He stood straighter, calmer, as if he carried a quiet certainty within him. Some villagers noticed. "He looks different today," one whispered. "Maybe he's just nervous," another replied. But Cabello didn't look nervous. He looked ready. As the ceremony time approached, a subtle shift moved through the atmosphere. It started small. A distant sound. Unfamiliar. Low, steady, mechanical. At first, no one paid much attention. But as the sound grew louder, people began to turn their heads toward the road leading into the village. "What is that?" someone asked. Dust began to rise in the distance. Then, vehicles appeared. Not one, several. Dark, polished, and completely out of place in a quiet farming village like Kijani. The music slowly faded. The laughter stopped. Curiosity turned into confusion. And confusion, into tension. Zuri, still inside, noticed the sudden silence outside. Her heart tightened slightly. "What's happening?" she asked. No one had an answer. The vehicles came to a stop near the gathering area. Doors opened, and men stepped out. Well-dressed, confident. Their presence alone shifted the energy of the entire village. These were not ordinary visitors. These were people of influence, authority, power. Whispers spread quickly. "Who are they? Why are they here? Is something wrong?" The elders stood, their expressions serious as they tried to understand what was unfolding. One of the men looked around briefly, scanning the crowd. Then his eyes landed on someone. Cabello. Without hesitation, he began walking toward him. The crowd parted slightly, creating a clear path. Every eye followed the movement. Every breath seemed to pause. Cabello didn't move. He simply stood there, calm, composed, as if this moment had always been part of the plan. The man reached him. And then, something happened that no one expected. He lowered his head slightly. A gesture of respect. "Sir," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering, "everything is prepared." The words echoed. And for a moment, no one understood them. Zuri, now standing near the entrance of her home, heard the voice from a distance. Her heart began to race, though she didn't yet know why. Outside, the villagers stared in disbelief. "Sir, prepared?" The man they were addressing was Cabello, the same quiet farmer. The same man they had seen working in the fields, the same man Zuri had rejected. Mandla Ndlovu stepped forward, confusion written across his face. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. The well-dressed man turned slightly, but his respect remained directed toward Cabello. He didn't answer Mandla. Because the answer was standing right in front of them. Cabello finally moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with a calm authority that no one had ever seen before. He looked around the village slowly, at the people, the elders, the gathering, and then, his gaze shifted. It landed on Zuri, standing at a distance, watching, frozen. For the first time since she had known him, Zuri felt something she had never felt before when looking at Cabello. Uncertainty. Because the man she thought she understood, was beginning to look like someone else entirely. And whatever truth was about to be revealed, it was going to change everything. The entire village of Kijani stood frozen, as if time itself had paused. The drums had stopped, the songs had faded, even the wind felt still. All eyes were on Cabello Makona. The same man they had seen working alone in the fields, the same man they had quietly underestimated, the same man Zuri had refused to marry in her heart, now stood at the center of something none of them understood. The well-dressed man remained slightly bowed, waiting. "Sir," he repeated calmly, "we're ready whenever you are." A heavy silence followed. Mandla Ndlovu's voice broke through it, firm but uncertain. "Someone explain what is happening here." But before anyone else could speak, Cabello took a step forward. Not as a farmer, not as a quiet villager, but as someone who no longer needed to hide. "My name," he said calmly, his voice steady and clear, "is Cabello Makona." A pause. "I am the owner of the agricultural development project being introduced in this region." The words didn't land all at once. They echoed, they settled, and then, they exploded into realization. Murmurs spread instantly through the crowd. "Owner? Project? What is he talking about?" Zuri's breath caught in her throat. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Cabello continued, his calm presence commanding attention without force. "For the past year, I have been working quietly across villages, observing the land, and the people," he said. "Not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as one of you." Shock deepened, because suddenly, everything began to make sense. Why he never tried to impress anyone. Why he lived simply. Why he never reacted to judgment. He hadn't needed to. He had been watching, learning, choosing. Mandla stepped back slightly, his authority shaken. You're saying all this time?" "Yes," Cabello replied calmly. "All this time." "Yes," Cabello replied calmly. "All this time." The well-dressed men behind him stood respectfully, confirming his words without needing to speak. Zuri felt the ground beneath her certainty collapse. The man she had rejected was not poor. He was powerful. Not loud power, not showy wealth, but real, quiet influence. The kind that didn't need to prove itself. Her heart began to race, not with excitement, but with something heavier. Regret. Cabello's gaze moved across the crowd slowly. "I wanted to see which village understood the true value of partnership," he continued. "Not just in land, but in people." The elders listened closely now, because this was no longer just a wedding. This was opportunity, future, everything they had hoped for. Resources, support, irrigation systems, education, these things can transform a village, Cabello said. But they must be placed in the right hands. The weight of his words pressed down on everyone, because suddenly, this wasn't guaranteed. It was being decided, right now. In this moment, Zuri stepped forward slowly, her eyes fixed on Cabello. Everything inside her felt different now. The confidence she once carried had faded, replaced by realization. "I didn't know," she said softly. Her voice wasn't the same anymore. There was no pride in it, only truth. Cabello looked at her, calm, unmoved. "You didn't try to know," he replied. The words hit harder than anything else could have, because they were true. Zuri lowered her gaze, her chest tightening. She remembered every moment, every cold look, every dismissive word, every assumption she had made. She had judged him, without ever seeing him. "I thought," she began, but stopped, because there was nothing she could say that would undo it. Cabello didn't interrupt. He simply waited, not for an excuse, but for understanding. "I was wrong," Zuri finally said. Simple, honest, real. The village watched in silence, because this wasn't just her moment. It was theirs too. They had all judged him, all underestimated him, all believed appearance defined worth. Cabello nodded slightly. "Many people make that mistake," he said. "The difference is whether they learn from it." His words carried no anger, but they carried truth. And truth doesn't need to shout to be powerful. He turned back to the elders. "This village has potential," he said. "Strong land, strong people, Hope flickered again. But potential alone is not enough. The air grew heavy. Respect, he continued, is the foundation of any growth. His eyes moved briefly across the crowd. And everyone understood what he meant. Then he spoke the words that would decide everything. The project will still move forward. Relief spread instantly. But, he added, silence returned. It will be led by those who understand value beyond appearance. A pause. Then his gaze shifted. To Zuri. The same woman who had rejected him. The same woman now standing in front of him, changed. Leadership requires more than ambition, he said. It requires growth. Zuri's heart pounded. Because she understood. This wasn't just about the project. This was about her. Her choices. Her mindset. Her future. Do you still refuse this marriage? Cabello asked calmly. The question echoed deeper than before. Because now. It meant something completely different. Zuri looked at him. Not at his clothes. Not at his status. But at him. For the first time. Truly. And what she saw, wasn't what she had expected. It was strength. Patience. Integrity. Everything she had overlooked. Her voice came slowly. I was running from the wrong things, she admitted. The village listened closely. I thought I needed a different life, but I never understood what truly mattered. Her words were no longer driven by pressure. They were her own. I don't refuse anymore, she said quietly. Cabello studied her for a moment, then nodded once, not as victory, but as understanding. The drums slowly began again, soft at first, then stronger. The tension lifted, replaced by something deeper. Not just celebration, but realization. The wedding that had begun with doubt, now carried meaning. And as the ceremony finally moved forward, the village of Kijani stood changed. Because they had learned something they would never forget. Never judge a person by their appearance. Sometimes, the one you underestimate the most, is the one who holds the power to change everything.